So thanks very much, everyone, for being here. I wanted to start with an anecdote. I'm lucky enough to have former New York City Mayor David Dinkins as a family friend. And he was the mayor for only one term. And he and his lovely wife, Joyce, he's told this story a few times, I think I can get it right now, were walking down the street in New York, and they saw, in this case it was men, digging ditches. And Joyce recognized one of the guys and said, "Hey, that was a former boyfriend of mine." So Mayor Dinkins said, aren't you lucky that you're married to me, because now you're the wife of the mayor?" And she said, "No, if I was married to him, he'd be the mayor." Thank you. That always gets a round of applause, so I'm happy about that. So it's not exactly what we're talking about, but the idea of having somebody behind you or somebody in your corner to mentor you or to sponsor you. And I kind of had to look up the difference. It's really very minimal. A mentor can also be a sponsor. The sponsor really just kind of promotes you. The mentor gives you advice, basically. Great. So there was an article online from Forbes, written by a female author, and she mentioned that men in leadership positions are less likely to mentor women into leadership positions. And part of it is that conscious or unconscious bias, and part of it is fear of accusations of harassment. So the Me Too movement has been important, but we have to be careful of a potential backlash there. While I was getting ready for this talk, starting a couple of months ago, I happened to be reading the New York Times Magazine, and on the cover is an article about the Salk Institute in San Diego, California, which is really a preeminent scientific organization, and the gender discrimination lawsuits that have been going on for several years. They just settled the last 3. But they highlight in the article that women have been undergoing scientific slights for many, many years, unfortunately. During the Age of Enlightenment, which was in the late 1600s to the early 1800s. Just before that, women were the predominant figures in science. Then the men got the idea, hey, this science might be a cool thing. You get a lot of status, and maybe you even get some money associated with it, and it became a predominantly male profession. So that was kind of interesting, I thought. Marie Curie was denied entry to the French National Academy despite having shared a Nobel Prize. And then in 1999, MIT report documented how women in the sciences had access to fewer resources than their male counterparts. So I will acknowledge that this is a biased presentation. It's not meant to be a bitch session, and you can use that word however you choose to use it. But we have to talk about the facts. And then the most important thing, though, is if you are mentored or you're sponsored or whatever, pay it forward. Help other people, whether it's a man or a woman, frankly. It doesn't have to just be your own gender. So this was the article that I was talking about, the Salk Institute, and they just concluded the last of the gender discrimination suits. And there were a few quotes in that article that I found really interesting and sad. Science and theory of meritocracy, in which results should speak for themselves and buoy their authors to the top. The number of women drops off, and we've been talking about this, at every increasing level of rank in academic or other science, for that matter. 2017 Harvard Business Review analysis found that female postdocs were systematically undervalued for their work, taking a year longer to receive an NIH grant than men with equivalent publication histories. And I found that actually in submitting what's called an SBIR grant, Small Business Innovation Research. I'd gotten a score, and then we got some comments back, and I resubmitted with my co-investigators, and we switched it. Rather than me being the PI, we really didn't make huge changes. I made a male colleague the PI, and the score improved dramatically. It might have just been the reviewers, but there was definitely at least one of the three that was the same. And that person's score, I don't know if it was a woman or a man, that person's score changed for the better. And then this was very interesting. So the last person to settle this Salk Institute lawsuit was Nancy, or is, she's still alive, Nancy Hopkins. And she had stellar credentials. Undergrad at Radcliffe College. Her mentor was Watson of Watson and Crick, the DNA helix. She was an assistant professor at MIT Center for Cancer Research, and she was quickly tenured. She wanted 200 square feet more for a funded zebrafish lab, and her boss said no. So she said, well, again, we're evidence-based. I'm going to go out and measure my male colleagues' labs. And she took out a tape measure and went around and measured all the labs. And to her consternation, she found that her space was more than 500 square feet smaller than the average male junior professor, and from 1,500 to 4,500 square feet smaller than her male fellow full professors. And her quote was, "Here I was measuring the goddamn laboratories, and I brought him the measurements, and he wouldn't even look at them." Really ridiculous. So mentors can provide a lot of very positive things in our working life as scientists or otherwise. They can really help provide a work-life balance, help you deal with different client and other types of management situations, help with career advice and a professional network, and help in projects, advocacy, and in mutual support. I wanted to tell you a little story about Marilyn Dick-Smith. So I was one of the 36 co-founders. There were actually, out of that group, there were 7 women. So we had approximately 20% women. And I was fortunate enough to be elected to the first board of directors of ISPOR. So we had everybody had a 2-year term, but one person had to have a 1-year term. Well, the only fair way to decide who got the 1-year term was to draw straws. I drew the short straw. And I might have been the only woman on the board, actually. And Marilyn was so upset. That's not fair, because I don't know how many of you know, but she was also one of the originating board members for the American Academy of Pharmaceutical Sciences. So she knew what it was like and how important it was to be on the board and that kind of thing. I said, Marilyn, don't worry about it. It's fine. But I really looked to her as a peer mentor. She was about my age, maybe a year or two older. But, she was a great person, and we're lucky to have Nancy here. But I really looked to her during that time. Next year will be ISPOR's 25th anniversary, which is pretty amazing. I've also been fortunate to mentor women throughout my lifetime. When I had my own consultancy for 17 years, I had women, actually we were hard-pressed to find men. The women just worked so much harder, and they were so much smarter. And sorry, guys in the audience, they just were. And it's the old, you work twice as hard to appear half as smart or whatever. It's just they had this work ethic, and it was, we'd kind of bring on a guy so it wouldn't be, oh, let's get the ladies to do to do the work. No, we're not just ladies, we're scientists, But anyway. We also had internships and things like that. And then over my last 2 positions, actually, I was brought in to develop an HEOR group at a small consultancy in San Francisco. And so I actually got to form our team. Most of them were women, but I did manage to find a couple of guys, so that was good. But what really attracted me was that all the people in leadership positions at this organization were women. And where I am now, it's the same way, that the senior principal, 4 senior principals, and the divisional director are women. So it means to me, just like what Nancy and Shelby have been saying, that ISPOR is wants to show that same leadership quality and put women in these positions and make it very visible. So how do you choose a mentor? You want somebody who's available and receptive. You want somebody who's enthusiastic and who will be an inspiration to you, both in the way they work and in their professional methodology. You want somebody that espouses thought leadership and can suggest ways for the mentee to embark on projects, and you certainly want somebody who's supportive. And again, just about as I was saying, pay it forward, well, return the favor. Your mentor probably needs to do business development. Maybe you've got some ideas. Don't hesitate to talk about those. Hey, I've got an idea for an abstract. How about if I do X, Y, Z? You know, okay, hey, you could be on it too. We all benefit. Okay, so the first poll is, do you have a mentor and or a sponsor? And we're asking the same question again, curious to see if we get the same answer.
How many mentors would you recommend people work together?
You know, it depends where you are in your stage of life and in your stage of your career. So if you find that you've got a mentor and everything is going great and they're able to move with the times, then that's great. If they're no longer fulfilling your needs, you get somebody else. It's a commodity to some extent.
Do you recommend having one inside the industry, one outside of the industry, in addition to one outside of the industry as well?
You know, those are good questions. It really will depend on, again, what fits your needs. I think it's important to have somebody that's in the same field because they understand what you're going to be going through and in your career. Now, again, that's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, but I really don't make that much of a distinction, honestly. However, I used to walk through Central Park with a friend of mine who, when I had my business, he had his own business. My husband is not an entrepreneur. I call him a Japanese salaryman. He's working for the same company for 40 years. That's kind of not me. So this guy really gave me some ideas about what to do and, within my own organization. And he had nothing. He was in bridal gowns. And I'm in HEOR. But, business is a business to some extent. So in that particular case, he was really useful to my needs at that time. But it's really important to assess where you are, as I said, in your career and in your life-work balance. Okay, so what did we get here? Have a mentor. Wow, it's even worse. 40%. Before we had 50%, right?
Well, 15% have a mentor.
And a sponsor. Okay, so
we
it's
add them
actually a little
together.
better. It's 55%, kind of, but, still not great. Okay. Okay, and so this was from last year's, so 51.8%, pretty similar. So, and this is to the audience members' point, how did you acquire your mentor and or your sponsor? Whoops, I gotta go back. Weren't we supposed to have multiple choice here?
On the app.
Oh, it's on
Okay.
there. Oh, great. Okay. I thought it would show up here.
Without my glasses, can you see it again? Still changing.
Okay, so I was really curious to know who actually reached out to a mentor and who had the mentor reach out to them. And again, was it in your organization or was it outside of your organization? the other is 28%, but we work for the same organization I asked, which is really good. That's really proactive and really important. She or he is my manager. So if your manager is also your mentor, that's fine. But if that's not the person to fill that role for you, maybe you want to suggest to your manager, hopefully your manager will suggest to you, hey, you know, I think because you're on this track, or I think from a personality standpoint or whatever, I think this person would be a good mentor for you. That's really great, but if they don't do that, say, I saw this person speak, or I, you know, have worked with this person and we have a really good working relationship. Maybe you ask your manager, what do you think? Or you just go to the person. And they're probably not going to scream at you and say, no, I'm crazy. You know, they'll either say yes, or they'll say, you know, my time doesn't allow for it, and, you know, whatever, they'll let you down. But yes, they're my manager, same organization. They reached out to me, so not too often. And that shows that you need to be proactive. That's very interesting. So the other thing that happened last year in the polling was the what did people want help in? And one of those concerns that people had was leadership skills. Mentoring and thought leadership really go hand in hand. And originally, I was asked just to speak with mentorship, but I really felt that thought leadership had a lot to do with mentorship and vice versa. So according to this website, thought leaders are the informed opinion leaders and the go-to people in their field of expertise. They are trusted sources, so again, sounds like mentorship to me, who move and inspire people with innovative ideas, turn ideas into reality, and know and show how to replicate their success. So mentors in terms of thought leadership increase your strategic visibility, exposure for your ideas both inside and outside of your organization. This thought leadership gives you the power to persuade people within your field of expertise and really makes you stand out. It can even help with a promotion at work, adding meaning to work, and provide a lasting legacy to you within your field of expertise. So I have another little anecdote that actually pertains to this particular meeting. I don't know how many of you know, but I just started a special interest group on open source models. And I've been working in this area and writing about it for over 10 years. And so I have a lot of other people, most of whom are men. A couple, maybe 3 years ago, I was at one of the ISPOR meetings, and I was at a social event. And somebody came up to me and said, Mike Drummond says that you know a lot about open source models, and we're looking to do an issue panel, and two guys asked me, and I asked Mike, he said, you know, that's really not my area of expertise, and he went to Mike Drummond, and Mike said, talk to Renée Arnold. She knows this area. So being on that issue panel, somebody came up after the panel and said, actually it was last year, and said, you know, this would make a great SIG. And so I have to thank Mike, who I brought on as our first plenary speaker at ISPOR. So thanks, Mike, for returning the favor. And that's because I spoke out. So even me, at this stage of my career, I still have to put myself forth and let people know I know what I'm talking about. So how do you embark on thought leadership besides having a big mouth? You definitely submit abstracts, just as Nancy was saying, to ISPOR hopefully, but to other medical conferences as well, based on your current work, maybe based on something that's quote unquote failed. You submitted something to a client or within an academic organization and it didn't fly. How many authors have submitted manuscript to publisher after publisher after all it takes is one, right? And you submit one and you're belaboring it and it doesn't get accepted. Oh, it wasn't good enough. No, submit 5, submit 6, look at different perspectives. Look at not just things that are successful, but things that may not be so successful at first glance, and try to make it into a success. Maybe you want to be more ambitious. So one of the things that came out recently was the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, ISPOR, in the U.S., not incremental cost effectiveness ratio, put out an RFP looking for ideas for value-based pricing. So I responded to that. I put together this treatise. Then I thought, I was successful enough. I was one of I don't know how many hundreds of responses, but I'm going to turn that into a white paper and maybe even into an article. Why not use that and turn it into something more than it was originally meant to be? And ask your mentor for ideas. Then the other anecdote, quickly, hopefully I have, is within my organization, I'm lucky enough to work with a pricing market access group pretty closely. So we have a client, and they're doing payer interviews, and we're doing the health economic strategy piece. And I was invited to participate in the payer interviews, which kind of isn't my usual role. But I thought, well, that'll be interesting. And what it did is, rather than not, hearing in reading in a PowerPoint the responses to the interviews, I got to listen to what these people were saying. And it was HTA authorities as well as payers in the U.S. and in the EU. And now this will inform the HE strategy that I'm suggesting to the client. So it allowed me, again, even in the stage of my career, to shadow, if you will, or collaborate with people that are closely allied with what I'm doing, but doing something a little bit different. And that's something that you might want to consider in your own organization. Is there something where I can contribute, they can contribute back to me, and we can make a better product together, and I learned something? Okay, another poll. Which of these thought leadership approaches have you tried? Okay, you guys think this is a multiple choice test and it's got to be all of the above, right? Is that how this is working? Okay. No, but that's great. And submitting abstracts, again, low-hanging fruit. There's all kinds of things that you wouldn't even know might interest people, but do. You do a literature review. That's an abstract. There's nothing wrong with that being an abstract. So are there risks associated with mentorship and or thought leadership? Hopefully you're not going to fall in the abyss. But, of course there are. Whenever you're putting yourself out there, you're making your thoughts known, there's a chance that you're going to be shot down. And frankly, that's how I came to this organization. I was at a meeting in North Carolina called HEOR at the time, 25 years ago. And Marilyn and Alan Bax came up to me after it was a 3-payer panel, and they had just finished saying that they hated models, they didn't believe in them, they would never use models, it kind of still sounds like today a little bit, black box, blah, blah, blah. So I got up to the mic, and I said, well, how about if we're transparent? How about, we say what's in the model, what are the nested equations, what are we really doing with these models? And they shot me down. No, we don't believe in it, it's garbage, blah, blah, blah. So I slunk back to my chair. And afterwards, they asked me, did I want to co-found an organization? So again, I thought I made a fool of myself, but here I am. So it wasn't that bad after all. It can happen. But as my dad always said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So, get out of your comfort zone a little bit. Get into maybe something that might be a little uncomfortable. Hopefully you don't get into your panic zone. That might not be a good look. But definitely consider putting yourself out there, letting it be known that you're interested in thought leadership and mentorship, and you'd be surprised what might come about from that. Thank you.